You are nothing. You have always been nothing. And tonight, in front of everyone who matters, I want them to see exactly what you are." The words hit Isla harder than any physical blow ever could. She stood frozen in the center of the grand ballroom, her engagement dress suddenly feeling like a costume, like a cruel joke she had been too naive to understand. Around her, hundreds of wolves from the most powerful packs in the territory watched with expressions ranging from pity to barely concealed satisfaction. This was supposed to be the night that changed everything. The night Marcus finally claimed her publicly, finally made their relationship official after 3 years of promises whispered in the dark, of assurances that he was just waiting for the right moment. But the right moment, it turned out, was this. The moment he could humiliate her most completely. Marcus stood beside Vivian Ashford, his hand possessively on her waist, and the beautiful daughter of the Silver. Moon Alpha looked at Isla with a smile that was all sharp edges and victory. "I am sorry you had to find out this way," Marcus continued, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom with theatrical sympathy that made Isla's stomach turn. "But Vivian and I have been true mates for months now. I felt the bond the moment we met. You must understand, Isla. One does not reject a bond given by the moon goddess herself for something as trivial as affection or history. Isla's wolf, dormant since birth in a way that had always made her lesser in the eyes of their pack, stirred somewhere deep inside her chest, not with power or rage, but with a whimper of pain so profound it nearly brought her to her knees. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand how he could do this after everything. But her voice had abandoned her along with her dignity. The whispers started then, spreading through the crowd like poison. Poor thing. She really thought he would choose her. An Omega with no wolf. What was she thinking? At least now she knows her place. Marcus was kind to let her believe it for as long as he did. The words blurred together into a symphony of her own inadequacy. Every insecurity she had ever felt about herself reflected back in the eyes of the pack. Her father, Delta Thomas Reed, stood near the back of the room with his new family, his face carefully neutral in a way that hurt worse than outright rejection. He had remarried 2 years after her mother died, and his new mate had made it abundantly clear that Isla was an unwelcome reminder of the past. He would not defend her. He never had. Isla. Her best friend Sage appeared at her elbow, voice urgent and low. "We need to leave, now, before this gets worse." But how could it get worse? She had been reduced to nothing in front of everyone. Her relationship revealed as the pathetic fantasy it had always been, her worth measured and found completely wanting. Marcus was still talking, something about wishing her well, and hoping she would understand, but Isla could not hear him anymore over the roaring in her ears. Her body moved without conscious thought, turning toward the grand entrance, her feet carrying her forward through the crowd that parted for her, like she carried some contagious disease. No one met her eyes. No one reached out to offer comfort. She was invisible again, just as she had always been except for those 3 years when Marcus had made her feel seen. What a fool she had been. The night. Air hit her face like a slap as she stumbled through the entrance of the Crescent Hall. The rain that had been threatening all evening finally breaking free from the heavy clouds above. Within seconds she was soaked, her carefully styled hair plastered to her face, her dress ruined beyond repair. Good. Let it be ruined. Let everything be ruined. She ran. She did not know where she was going, only that she needed to be away, far away from the pity and the whispers and the suffocating weight of her own humiliation. Her feet found the forest path by instinct, the same path she had walked 1,000 times as a child when she needed to escape her father's house, when the loneliness became too much to bear. The storm intensified, thunder cracking overhead so loudly it shook the ground beneath her feet. Lightning illuminated the trees in brief, stark flashes that turned the familiar forest into something alien and threatening. She did not care. Let the storm take her. Let the forest swallow her whole. Anything would be better than going back, than facing tomorrow and all the tomorrows after, when everyone would know exactly what she was. Nothing. She had always been nothing. Her foot caught on an exposed root, and she went down hard, her knees hitting the mud with a force that sent pain shooting up her legs. She did not get up. What was the point? The rain pounded down on her bent back, mixing with tears she had not realized she was crying, and Isla finally let herself break. The sobs came from somewhere deep inside her chest, ugly and raw and completely beyond her control. She cried for the girl who had believed in fairy tales, for the woman who had been stupid enough to trust empty promises, for every moment of the last 3 years that had been built on lies. She cried until her throat was raw and her body shook with exhaustion, until she had nothing left inside her but a hollow ache that felt like it might never heal. You should not be out here alone. The voice came from directly behind her, deep and rich and carrying an authority that made every instinct she possessed snap to attention. Isla's head jerked up, rain and tears blurring her vision as she tried to make out the figure standing just beyond the reach of her sight. I said you should not be out here alone, the voice repeated, closer now. And then he was kneeling beside her in the mud, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as if powerful wolves knelt in the dirt for broken omegas. Every day. The storm is dangerous. You could be hurt. Through her tears and the rain, Isla finally focused on the man beside her. Tall, broader through the shoulders than any wolf she had ever seen, with dark hair that the rain had turned black, and eyes that seemed to glow silver even in the darkness. His face was all sharp angles and harsh lines, beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at. And he radiated power that made the air around him feel thick and charged. She should be afraid. Every instinct should be screaming at her to run from a male this dominant, this clearly dangerous. But she was too empty to feel fear, too broken to care about self-preservation. Go away, she managed, her voice coming out hoarse and small. Just go away. I want to be alone. No. The simple refusal caught her off guard. You want to hurt. There is a difference, and I will not leave you here to do it. He shifted, and she realized he had draped his jacket over her shoulders at some point, the expensive fabric already soaked through but providing some small barrier against the cold. Who are you? The question came out before she could stop it, and she saw something flicker across his face. Surprise, maybe? Or calculation. Someone who understands what it feels like to have your world end, he said finally. Someone who knows that sometimes the only thing that helps is having another person sit with you in the rain. So that is what I am going to do. Sit here with you. You do not have to talk. You do not have to explain. Just let me be here. Isla stared at him, searching for the angle, for the trap, for whatever game he was playing. But his eyes held nothing but a strange gentleness that seemed completely at odds with the predatory power she could feel rolling off him in waves. I was rejected tonight, she heard herself say, the words spilling out before she could stop them. In front of everyone. My mate. He chose someone else. Someone better. Someone worthy of him. Then he is a fool. The stranger's voice hardened, taking on an edge that sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Any male who would humiliate his female publicly, who would break her in front of a crowd for his own ego, is not worthy of being called a wolf, much less a mate. Something in those words, in the absolute conviction with which he spoke them, cracked something open inside Isla's chest. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the rain, and she found herself leaning slightly toward this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere to sit with her in the mud. I thought he loved me, she whispered. I was so sure. 3 years, and I never saw it coming. How could I be so blind? "Love makes fools of us all," the stranger said quietly. "It makes us believe in things that are not real, see qualities in people that do not exist. That is not your failing. That is what love does. It transforms reality into what we want it to be." He paused, and something painful crossed his face. "I know this better than most." They sat in silence for a long moment, the storm raging around them. Two strangers sharing the kind of pain that went too deep for words. Isla became aware of his presence beside her in a way that felt almost physical, like an invisible thread connecting them through the darkness. It should have been uncomfortable. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt like the first real thing she had experienced in hours. "What is your name?" he asked eventually, his voice barely audible over the thunder. "Isla," she answered. "Isla Reed. Nobody important. Just an Omega with no wolf, and apparently no ability to see when she is being used." She laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. "Who are you, besides someone who makes a habit of rescuing pathetic females from their own stupidity?" "Kyle," he said, and something in the way he said it made her think he was used to his name carrying weight, sparking recognition. When she showed none, he smiled slightly, the expression transforming his harsh features into something almost boyish. "Just Kale. And you are not pathetic, Isla Reed. You are hurt. There is a profound difference." He stood then, rising from the mud with a fluid grace that spoke of the predator beneath the skin, and held out his hand to her. "Come. Let me take you somewhere dry. Somewhere safe. You can return to your pack tomorrow, after the storm has passed, and you have had time to breathe. But tonight, let me give you this. A place to rest. Nothing more." Isla looked at his outstretched hand, at the stranger who had found her at her absolute lowest, and offered nothing but quiet understanding and shelter from the storm. Every rational thought told her to refuse, to go back to the pack house and face the aftermath with whatever dignity she could salvage. But rational thought had gotten her exactly nowhere. It had led her to trust Marcus, to believe his lies, to make herself small and grateful. For scraps of attention. Maybe it was time to stop being rational. Maybe it was time to do something completely insane. She put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, strong and warm despite the cold rain, and he pulled her gently to her feet. Her legs wobbled, exhaustion and emotion making her unsteady, and his other hand came to her elbow to support her weight. "I have you," he said simply. "I will not let you fall." And for some inexplicable reason, Isla believed him. They walked. Through the forest in silence, his hand never leaving hers, his presence beside her solid and reassuring in a way that made no sense given that she had known him for all of 20 minutes. The storm continued to rage overhead, but somehow it felt distant now, as if the worst of it had already passed. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, the trees opened up onto a clearing where a vehicle waited, sleek and black and clearly expensive. A driver stood beside it, holding an umbrella despite being clearly soaked through already, and his eyes widened when he saw Kale approaching with Isla in tow. "You're Maj," the driver started, then stopped abruptly when Kale shot him a look that could have frozen fire. "Sir," he corrected smoothly. "I was beginning to worry. The storm is quite severe." "We are fine, Marcus," Kale said, and Isla flinched at the name, a fresh wave of pain washing over her. Kale noticed immediately, his hand tightening on hers. "Take us to the northern estate, the private quarters. No one is to know we are there." "Of course, sir." The driver opened the door, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes sharp with curiosity as they flicked between Kale and Isla. "Right away." Kale handed Isla into the vehicle first, following close behind, and the door closed with a soft click that seemed to seal them into their own private world. The interior was warm and dry, leather seats that felt like butter beneath her mud-covered dress, and Isla was suddenly, acutely aware of how completely wrecked she must look. "I am sorry," she said automatically, gesturing at the mud she was tracking everywhere, at her ruined dress and tangled hair. "I am making a mess of everything. Isla." Kale's voice was firm but gentle. "Stop apologizing for existing. Stop making yourself small. The car can be cleaned. You needed help. Nothing else matters." He reached across the space between them and very carefully tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear, the gesture so intimate and unexpected that Isla felt her breath catch. "Just breathe. You are safe now." If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The drive took less than 15 minutes, but by the time they arrived at what Kale had called the Northern Estate, Isla was fighting to keep her eyes open. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was crashing hard, leaving her body heavy and her mind foggy with exhaustion. She had a vague impression of massive iron gates, of a driveway that seemed to stretch on forever, of a house that was really more of a mansion, all stone and towering windows that gleamed in the lightning. Then Kale was helping her out of the car, his hand steady on her back as he guided her through a side entrance and up a flight of stairs that her legs could barely manage. "Almost there," he murmured, and she leaned into him without meaning to, her body recognizing something in his presence that her mind was too tired to question. They entered a room that Isla registered only as warm and softly lit, with a bathroom visible through an open door. Kyle led her to a chair, easing her down with a care that made her throat tight. "There are clothes in the bathroom," he said, crouching in front of her so they were eye level. "Take a hot shower. Get warm. I will have food sent up and then you can rest. In the morning we will figure out what comes next. But for tonight, just focus on getting through the next hour. Can you do that for me?" Isla nodded, not trusting her voice, and Kyle rose smoothly to his feet. He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Isla." She looked up at him, at this stranger who had shown her more kindness in an hour than she had received in months. "You are not nothing," he said quietly. "Whatever that fool told you, whatever you are feeling right now, you are not nothing. And I am going to prove it too. You." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him, and Isla was alone with her thoughts for the first time since her world had imploded. She should be scared. She should be questioning every decision that had led her to this moment, to accepting help from a man whose last name she did not even know, to being alone in his home with no way to contact anyone. But as she forced her aching body out of the chair and toward the bathroom, all she felt was a bone-deep gratitude that someone, anyone, had cared enough to pull her out of the storm. The shower was long and hot, the water pressure almost punishing as it beat against her skin, washing away the mud and the rain and what felt like layers of accumulated pain. She stayed under the spray until her skin was pink and her fingers were pruned, until she could no longer tell if the wetness on her face was water or tears. When she finally emerged, wrapped in a towel that was softer than anything she had ever owned, she found clothes, laid out on the bed. Not the kind of seductive negligee she might have expected from a strange male, but comfortable cotton pants and an oversized shirt that smelled clean and faintly of cedar and winter storms. She dressed quickly, her body moving on autopilot, and had just finished towel drying her hair when a soft knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called, expecting a servant or maybe the driver from earlier. Instead, Kale entered carrying a tray laden with food, simple things, soup, and bread and fruit. But the smell made Isla's stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. "I thought you might not want to see anyone else right now," he explained, setting the tray on a small table by the window. "So I brought it myself. I hope that is all right." "You did not have to do that," Isla said. But she was already moving toward the food, drawn by a need that went beyond simple hunger. "You have already done more than enough." "I disagree," Kyle said simply. He settled into the chair. Across from her, watching as she took her first tentative bite of soup. "I have done the bare minimum of what any decent person would do. You needed help. I provided it. That is not exceptional. That is simply being a wolf who understands that pack, true pack, means taking care of each other even when we are strangers." Isla wanted to argue, to point out that in her experience, pack meant politics and hierarchy and using people until they were no longer useful. But the soup was incredible, rich, and warming, and exactly what her battered body needed. And she found herself eating with an intensity that would have embarrassed her if she had any embarrassment left to give. Kyle did not speak while she ate, just sat quietly in the chair, his presence somehow both soothing and electrifying in equal measure. When she finally pushed the bowl away, more than half the food consumed, he smiled. "Better?" "Better," Isla agreed. Then, because she could not help herself, because the question had been burning in her mind since he found her in the forest, she asked, "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. For all you know, I am exactly what Marcus said I am. Nothing worth anyone's time or effort." Kale's expression darkened, a flash of something dangerous moving behind his silver eyes. "First," he said, his voice taking on an edge that raised goosebumps on her arms. "Stop using his words to define yourself. He does not get to decide your worth. No one does except you. Second," he leaned forward, his gaze intense and focused entirely on her, in a way that made her feel like she was the only person in the entire world. "I am doing this because when I saw you in that forest, broken and crying, and so completely lost, I saw myself 5 years ago. I saw the moment my world ended, and I wished more than anything that someone had been there to tell me I was not alone. So I am telling you, you are not alone. Not tonight." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning and shared pain, and Isla felt something shift inside her chest. Not the mate bond, she was certain of that. She had felt that with Marcus, or thought she had, and this was different. This was recognition of a different kind. A meeting of two people who had both walked through fire and come out scarred but still standing. What happened 5 years ago? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and she immediately wished she could take it back when she saw the way Kale's expression shuddered, walls slamming down behind his eyes. "I lost someone," he said after a long moment. "Someone I should have protected. Someone whose death was my fault in every way that matters. And I have spent the last 5 years trying to be the male she deserved, even though she is not here to see it." The grief in his voice was old, but not healed. A wound that had scarred over, but never truly closed. And Isla found herself reaching across the space between them to touch his hand. It was a bold gesture, especially for an Omega to an Alpha as clearly dominant as Kale. But she could not stop herself. He looked down at her hand on his, surprise flickering across his features. Then very slowly, very deliberately, he turned his palm up and laced his fingers through hers. The touch sent electricity racing up her arm, a sensation so intense she nearly pulled back. But Kale held firm, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "I am sorry for your loss," Isla whispered. "And I am sorry that you blame yourself. But I think, if she loved you, she would not want you to carry that guilt forever. She would want you to be happy. Perhaps," Kyle said, his voice rough, "but happiness feels like a betrayal when you are the reason someone is gone." They sat like that for a long time, hands linked across the table, two damaged people finding unexpected comfort in shared understanding. Eventually, Isla's eyes began to drift closed despite her best efforts. Exhaustion finally. Winning the battle against her determination to stay awake, to make this strange, surreal night last just a little longer. "You need to sleep," Kale said gently, reluctantly releasing her hand and standing. I will be just next door if you need anything. Anything at all. Just call out and I will hear you. Thank you, Isla managed, the words feeling completely inadequate for everything he had done. For the kindness he had shown a stranger for no reason, except that she needed it. Thank you, Cale. For everything. He paused at the door, looking back at her with an expression she could not quite read. Sleep well, Isla Reed. Tomorrow will be better. I promise you that. Then he was gone, and Isla was alone again. But this time, the solitude did not feel suffocating. This time, she had the memory of silver eyes and a warm hand, and a voice that promised she was worth saving even when she could not believe it herself. She climbed into the bed, which was easily the most comfortable thing she had ever laid on, and pulled the covers up to her chin. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to ease, the thunder growing distant, the rain softening to a gentle patter against the windows. And for the first time in hours, maybe in years, Isla Reed allowed herself to simply exist without apologizing for it. She fell asleep with tears still drying on her cheeks, but with the smallest spark of something that might, eventually, become hope. She woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the momentary panic of not knowing where she was. Then memory crashed back in, the rejection and the storm and Kyle, and Isla sat up abruptly, her heart racing as she tried to orient herself in the light of day. The room was beautiful. She realized now that she could actually see it. Decorated in soft grays and deep blues, with furniture that was clearly expensive but not ostentatious. There were books on the shelves, actual paper books which were rare enough to be noteworthy, and art on the walls that looked original rather than printed. This was not a guest room. This was someone's personal space, and she had a sinking feeling she knew whose. She had just swung her legs out of bed, trying to decide what the appropriate protocol was for morning after accepting help from a mysterious stranger, when a knock sounded at the door. Isla? Are you awake? Kyle's voice, muffled by the wood, but still somehow managing to make her pulse kick up a notch. I am bringing breakfast. May I come in? Yes, she called back, then immediately wished she had said no, so she could have a few more minutes to compose herself, to figure out what expression she should be wearing, what words she should say. But the door was already opening and Kyle was entering, once again carrying a tray of food, and Isla found herself staring. In the daylight, without the rain and darkness obscuring him, Kyle was even more striking than she remembered. Tall and powerfully built, moving with a predatory grace that spoke of a warrior's training, with those silver eyes that seemed to see right through her. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, and a gray shirt, but they fit him in a way that suggested they had been tailored specifically for his body. This was not just any dominant alpha. This was someone important, someone powerful. Good morning, he said, setting the tray on the table, and then, to her surprise, settling himself on the edge of her bed with a casualness that suggested he had every right to be there. How did you sleep? Better than I have in a long time, Isla admitted, then felt her cheeks heat. Thank you for letting me stay, and for the clothes, and the food, and just everything. Cale waved off her gratitude with a small smile. You already thanked me, multiple times. You do not need to keep doing it. He studied her for a moment, his expression growing more serious. How are you feeling? Really feeling, not the polite answer you think you should give? Isla considered lying, offering up something brave, and recovered. But after everything he had done, after the vulnerability they had shared in the storm, he deserved honesty. Lost, she said finally. Embarrassed. Angry at myself for being so stupid. Terrified about going back and facing everyone. But also, she paused, searching for the right words. Also strangely okay? Like, maybe I will survive this after all. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Cale said. No, Isla Reed, you are stronger than you. I saw that last night. Most wolves would have crumbled completely under that kind of public humiliation. But you got up. You walked out. You did not beg or plead or make a scene. You maintained your dignity even when everything inside you was screaming. That takes a kind of strength most people never find. His words settled something inside her, soothing a raw place she had not realized was still bleeding. I did not feel strong, she confessed. I felt pathetic. Strength is not the absence of pain or fear, Kyle said quietly. It is moving forward despite them. It is surviving when every part of you wants to give up. You did that. You are doing that right now. That is strength. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Isla felt that strange connection from the night before flare back to life. That sense of recognition that went deeper than words or logic. She wanted to ask who he really was, why a male this powerful and clearly well-educated and sophisticated was wasting his time on someone like her. But she was afraid of the answer, afraid that knowing would break whatever spell had been woven between them in the rain. Eat, Kyle said finally, gesturing to the tray. Then we need to talk about what happens next, about where you want to go and what you need from me to make that happen. What I want, Isla said slowly, picking up a piece of toast more to have something to do with her hands than because she was hungry, is to disappear. To go somewhere no one knows me or knows what happened. To start over completely. That can be arranged, Kale said immediately. I have contacts all over the territory. I can have you placed somewhere safe, somewhere far from your old pack, with a new identity if you want it. You would never have to see any of them again. It was everything she had thought she wanted. A clean break, a fresh start, a chance to rebuild herself without the weight of everyone's pity and judgment. But even as he offered it, Isla felt something in her chest resist. That feels like running, she heard herself say. Like letting him win. Like proving that I really am nothing worth staying for. Kale's eyes flashed with approval. Then what do you want to do instead? What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. I want to go back, Isla said, the decision crystallizing even as she spoke the words. I want to face them all. I want to prove that I am more than what he said I was. She faltered, doubt creeping in. I do not know how to do that. I have no power, no status, no wolf. What do I possibly have that would make them see me as anything other than the pathetic Omega who got rejected? Kale stood, pacing to the window with the restless energy of a caged predator. You have me, he said finally, turning back to face her with an intensity that stole her breath. If you will accept my help, if you trust me. I do not understand, Isla said. What are you offering? Protection, Kyle said. Training, a place in my household if you want it. The chance to discover who you are when you are not being defined by someone else's low opinion of you. He moved closer, crouching in front of her so they were eye level. I see something in you, Isla. Something strong and fierce that has been beaten down but never broken. I want to help you find it, help you claim it. And when you are ready, when you have become who you are meant to be, we can return to your pack and show them exactly what they lost when they dismissed you. The offer was insane. Accepting it would mean binding herself to this stranger, trusting him with her safety and her future, based on nothing but a single night of kindness. Every rational thought told her to refuse, to take his other offer of relocation and disappear into anonymity. But Isla Reed was done being rational, done playing it safe, done making herself small to fit into spaces that were never meant to hold her. Yes, she said, meeting his silver eyes with a steadiness she did not quite feel. Yes, I accept, on one condition. Name it, Kale said immediately. Tell me who you really are, Ayla said. No more evasions, no more half-truths. If I am going to trust you with my life, I need to know exactly who I am trusting. Kale's expression went carefully blank, and for a moment, Isla thought he would refuse, would stand and withdraw his offer, and prove that her instinct to trust him had been just another in a long line of mistakes. Then he smiled, a real smile that transformed his harsh features into something almost boyish, and said, "Fair enough. You deserve the truth." He stood, moving to the window again, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone delivering news he knew would change everything. "My name is Cale Blackthorn. I am the Alpha King of the Northern Territories. The male you met last night, the one who sat with you in the mud, he is who I am. When I am allowed to simply be Cale. But the rest of the time, I am the king, the ruler of the largest pack alliance in the territory, the male every other alpha fears or wants to use for political gain." The words hit Isla like a physical blow. The Alpha King. She had accepted help from, had held hands with, had spent the night in the home of the most powerful wolf in the entire territory. The male whose reputation for ruthless efficiency and cold calculation had reached even her small, insignificant pack. The male who had executed his own second-in-command for betraying pack laws, who had waged war on 3 neighboring packs that had tried to challenge his authority, and won so decisively that no one had dared question him since. That male had knelt in the mud beside her and promised her she was not nothing. "I think I am going to need to sit down," Isla said faintly, even though she was already sitting. "Actually, I think I might need to throw up. You are the... Oh. Goddess. The driver last night, he almost called you Your Majesty." "He did," Cal confirmed, turning back to face her. "And I stopped him because I wanted you to know me as just a male first, not the king, not the crown or the power or the politics, just me. Was that wrong?" "I do not know," Isla said honestly. Her mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the gentle stranger from the storm with the ruthless king from the stories, trying to understand what possible reason he could have for caring about her when he had literally thousands of wolves who would kill for his attention. Why? Why would someone like you waste time on someone like me? "Because 5 years ago the female I lost was my mate," Cale said quietly, each word seeming to cost him. "My true mate, given to me by the moon goddess herself, and I failed to protect her from the very wolves who should have been celebrating our bond. She died because of my crown, because there were those who thought eliminating her would make me weaker, more controllable." His hands clenched into fists at his sides, and Isla could see the way his control was fraying at the edges, grief and rage warring in his expression. "Since that night, I have been exactly what they wanted. Cold, ruthless, focused only on duty and power and maintaining control. I have not felt anything real in 5 years. I have not allowed myself to care about anyone or anything beyond pack law and territory boundaries." He met her eyes, and what she saw there stole her breath. "And then last night, I found you, broken and crying and so beautifully, honestly human in your pain. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt something. Compassion. Connection. The desire to help someone not because it benefited me or the pack, but simply because you deserved help. You woke something up in me that I thought died with her, Isla, and I am not ready to let that go." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying in its implications. Isla knew she should be careful, should protect herself, should remember that she had just been burned badly by trusting a male who made pretty promises. But looking into Cale's eyes, seeing the vulnerability he was offering her, she could not make herself believe this was the same. This felt real in a way Marcus had never been. "I do not know what to say," she whispered. "Say you will stay," Cale said simply. "Say you will let me help you become who you are meant to be. Whatever happens after that, whatever this connection between us becomes or does not become, at least give us the chance to find out. Please." Isla took a deep breath, feeling like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, with no idea if there was water below or rocks. But she had already decided she was done playing it safe, done letting fear control her choices. "Okay," she said. "I will stay. I will let you help me. But Kyle..." She stood, moving closer to him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body. "If you hurt me, if this turns out to be some kind of game or political maneuver, I will not survive it. I have nothing left to break. So I need you to be absolutely certain this is what you want before we go any further." "I am certain," Kyle said, and there was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt in his eyes. "I swear to you on my crown, on my pack, on everything I am, I will not hurt you. I will protect you, help you, stand beside you against anyone who tries to diminish you. This I vow." And somehow, impossibly, Isla believed him. The next few weeks passed in a blur of training and discovery that transformed Isla's understanding of everything she thought she knew about herself. Kyle was true to his word, providing her with a place in his household as his personal assistant, a position that gave her access to pack business and political maneuvering without raising too many questions about why the king had taken an interest in an unknown Omega. But the real transformation happened in the early mornings and late evenings, when Kyle personally trained her in combat and strategy and the art of reading wolves and their intentions. "You are holding back," Kyle said one morning, circling her on the training mat with the focused intensity of a predator. "You telegraph every move before you make it because some part of you does not believe you have the right to strike first. Let go of that belief, Isla. On this mat, you have every right." Isla lunged, putting all her frustration and anger behind the movement, and managed to land a hit to Kale's ribs that made him grunt with surprised approval. "Better," he said, catching her wrist and using her own momentum to flip their positions. She ended up on her back on the mat, Kale's body pinning hers, his face inches from her own. "But you are still thinking too much. Let your instincts guide you." "My instincts say I should not be trying to fight an alpha king," Isla muttered, very aware of the way their bodies fit together, of the heat of his skin through their training clothes. "Your instincts are learning," Kyle countered, but he did not move, his silver eyes searching hers with an intensity that had nothing to do with combat training. "Tell me something, Isla. When I am this close to you, what do you feel? And do not give me the answer you think I want. Give me the truth." "Confused," Isla admitted, her heart racing. "Attracted in a way that terrifies me because I just got out of a relationship where I clearly could not trust my own judgment about people. Safe, which makes no sense because you are literally the most dangerous wolf I have ever met. And..." She hesitated, then plunged forward. "Connected. Like there is something between us that I do not understand but also cannot deny." "Good," Kyle breathed, and the satisfaction in his voice sent heat spiraling through her. "That is very good, because I feel it too. Every day we train, every conversation we have, every moment I am near you, I feel it getting stronger, and I do not know what to do about it because you deserve time to heal, time to discover who you are outside of any male's influence. But goddess help me, Isla. You make me want things I swore I would never want again." He rolled off her then, putting distance between them, and Isla immediately felt the loss like a physical ache. "We should get back to training," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "You have a meeting with the pack accountant in an hour, and you need to understand the budget numbers if you are going to sit in." "Kale," Isla called as he moved toward the weapons rack. "What are we doing? Really doing? Because this does not feel like just helping me discover myself anymore. This feels like something more. Something complicated." "It is complicated," Kyle agreed, turning back to face her. "It is the most complicated thing I have dealt with in years. But I am not sorry for it. Are you?" "No," Isla said, and realized it was true. Despite the confusion, despite the fear of being hurt again, despite every rational reason she should be protecting herself. She was not sorry. I am not sorry at all. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibilities and unspoken promises, until a knock at the training room door shattered it. "Your Majesty," a voice called. "I apologize for the interruption, but there are visitors at the gate, representatives from the Crescent Pack. They say it is urgent." Isla felt her. Blood turned to ice. The Crescent Pack. Marcus's pack. Her former pack. They had found her. Kale's expression went from open and vulnerable to cold and controlled in an instant, the king sliding back into place like armor. "Tell them I will receive them in the formal receiving room in 30 minutes, he called back. "And Marcus, make sure the guard is doubled. I do not trust this visit." "Yes, Your Majesty." The footsteps retreated, and Kale turned back to Isla with concern written clearly on his face. "You do not have to see them," he said immediately. "I can have you taken to the private wing. They do not need to know you are here." "No," Isla said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "No, I want to be there. I want to see what they want. Besides, if I am supposed to be your assistant, it would look strange if I disappeared the moment my former pack arrived." Kale studied her for a long moment. "You are sure? Because Isla, if they came all this way, it is not for a social call. They want something, and I need to know you can handle whatever they are about to put you through without breaking." "I will not break," Isla said, and meant it. The girl who had run crying into the forest was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who had learned to throw a punch and read a contract, and recognize manipulation when she saw it. "I am not the same person I was a month ago. Let me prove it. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on. Then go get changed," Kale said. "Put on something that shows them exactly how far you have come. And Isla." He caught her hand as she moved past him toward the door. "No matter what they say, no matter what they offer or threaten, remember this. You do not belong to them anymore. You belong to yourself, and if you choose, you belong here, with me. They have no power over you unless you give it to them." Isla squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his touch, then headed for her rooms to prepare for battle. 30 minutes later, Isla stood slightly behind and to the left of Kyle's throne in the formal receiving room, her hands clasped in front of her in the pose of a dutiful assistant. She wore a simple but elegant dress in deep blue, her hair pulled back in a severe style that made her look older and more sophisticated than she felt. She had learned to school her expression into neutrality, to keep her emotions locked down where no one could see them. When the doors opened and the Crescent Pack delegation entered, she did not so much as flinch. There were 3 of them. Marcus, looking uncomfortable in formal dress. Vivian, stunning in silver silk with her hand possessively on Marcus's arm. And Alpha Kenneth Morrison, Marcus's father and the leader of the Crescent Pack, whose eyes swept the room with the assessing gaze of a career politician. Those eyes passed over Isla without recognition, dismissing her as just another servant, and she felt a small, savage satisfaction at being so completely invisible to them. "Your Majesty," Alpha Kenneth said, bowing with just enough depth to be respectful without being obsequious. "Thank you for receiving us on such short notice. We apologize for the intrusion, but the matter is quite urgent." "Alpha Morrison," Kale acknowledged, his voice cool and detached. "You said in your message that this concerned a missing member of your pack. I admit to some confusion about why this would require my personal involvement. The female in question is," Alpha Kenneth paused delicately, "connected to my family. My son's former intended. She disappeared the night of their engagement celebration, and we have been unable to locate her. Given your presence at that celebration, we hoped you might have seen something, heard something, that could help us locate her." Isla's heart began to pound, but she kept her expression carefully blank. her breathing steady and controlled exactly as Cale had taught. Her. They did not know. They had no idea she was standing right here, had been living under Cale's protection for weeks. The female's name? Cale asked, as if he did not already know, as if Isla was not fighting the urge to step forward and announce herself just to see the shock on their faces. Isla Reed, Marcus said, speaking for the first time. His voice was tight with what might have been guilt, or might have been annoyance at having to be here at all. She was, an Omega in our pack. She ran off during the celebration in some kind of emotional episode. We are concerned for her safety. An emotional episode, Cale repeated, and Isla heard the dangerous edge underlying the words, even if the Crescent Pack delegation did not. How unfortunate. And what prompted this episode? A misunderstanding. Vivian interjected smoothly, her voice all honey and false sympathy. Marcus and I discovered we were true mates, blessed by the moon goddess herself. In our joy, we perhaps did not handle the announcement as delicately as we might have. Poor Isla was understandably upset to learn that Marcus would not be able to fulfill his previous commitment to her. How very understanding of you to acknowledge her feelings, Cale said, his tone absolutely flat. Tell me, was this misunderstanding announced publicly, in front of the entire pack? Well, yes, Alpha Kenneth admitted, but it seemed important to be transparent about the situation, to avoid any rumors or speculation. Surely your Majesty understands the importance of clarity in pack politics. I understand many things, Cale said. I understand that publicly humiliating a female, Omega or not, is considered grounds for challenging an Alpha's fitness to lead in most packs. I understand that announcing a true mate bond, while an existing commitment remains in place, is a direct violation of the Accord of United Packs, which I personally enforce. And I understand that you seem far more concerned about appearances than about the well-being of a missing member of your pack. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Alpha Kenneth's expression went from confident to wary. Marcus paled, and even Vivian's smile faltered. Your Majesty, Alpha Kenneth started. We meant no disrespect. You simply want me to help you find Isla Reed, so you can sweep your son's cruelty under the rug and maintain the illusion that the Crescent Pack operates with honor. Cale finished coldly. Unfortunately for you, I have no information about her whereabouts. She was not among the guests I encountered that evening. For all I know, she left Packlands entirely and is halfway across the territory by now, which, given how she was treated, would be a perfectly reasonable response. But Your Majesty, Vivian said, stepping forward with a calculated show of concern. If she left Packlands without permission, without proper arrangements, she could be in terrible danger. Surely you would not want an innocent Omega's suffering on your conscience. My conscience is clear, Cale said. Yours, however, seems to be driving you to extraordinary lengths to locate a female you claim was just a misunderstanding. Which makes me wonder what you are not telling me. What are you really afraid of? Isla saw the moment Alpha Kenneth made a decision, saw the shift in his stance from supplicant to something harder. We are afraid, he said slowly, that Isla Reed, in her distress, might say or do things that would embarrass the Crescent Pack, make accusations that are not grounded in reality, but could damage relationships between packs if they reach the wrong ears. We simply want to bring her home, help her understand that no harm was meant, ensure she is cared for properly going forward. Ah, Kyle said softly, and Isla recognized the tone. It was the one he used right before he delivered a killing blow in negotiations. Now we come to the truth. You are afraid she will tell people what you did, that she will expose your son's cruelty and your own complicity in it. That is what this is really about. With respect, Your Majesty, Marcus said, finally finding his voice. Isla can be quite dramatic when she does not get what she wants. This whole situation has been blown out of proportion. We just want to make things right. The words, the casual dismissal in his tone, the suggestion that she had been unreasonable to be hurt by his public betrayal. It was too much. Before she could remember her plan to stay silent and invisible, Isla stepped forward. "Dramatic," she said, her voice ringing clear in the suddenly silent room. "You think I was being dramatic?" Every head whipped toward her, and she watched with savage satisfaction as recognition bloomed on Marcus's face, followed by shock and something that might have been fear. Alpha Kenneth and Vivian looked confused, still not placing her, but Marcus knew. "Isla?" he breathed. "What are you? How are you? You are here?" "I am here," Isla confirmed, moving to stand beside Kale's throne with her head held high and her voice steady. "I have been here since the night you humiliated me in front of everyone we knew. The night you called me nothing. The night you proved exactly what you are. A coward who broke a promise because it was politically convenient and then tried to frame it as some kind of divine intervention. You have no right," Vivian started, but Isla cut her off with a look. That could have frozen fire. "I have every right. You do not speak to me. You do not about me. You are the reason I spent 3 years believing in a lie, but you do not get to define my response to learning the truth." She turned back to Marcus, who was staring at her like she had grown a second head. "You are wondering how I got here, what I am doing in the Alpha King's household, whether I told him everything you did. Good. Wonder. Worry. Because yes, I told him. I told him every detail of how you used me, made me believe we had something real, then discarded me like garbage the moment a better option presented herself. And you know what he did?" She glanced at Kale, at the male who had saved her in every way that mattered, and felt something warm and fierce bloom in her chest. "He told me I was worth more. He showed me I was worth more. And he has spent the last month proving it in ways you never could have because you never actually saw me at all." "Isla," Alpha Kenneth said, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. "Please, let us discuss this reasonably. If you feel you were wronged, there are proper channels, appropriate ways to address grievances. Running to the king, making wild accusations, this benefits no one." "Wild accusations," Isla repeated. She turned to Kale, eyebrow raised. "Your Majesty, were your observations of the engagement celebration wild accusations, or were they accurate descriptions of what occurred?" Kale's smile was sharp and dangerous as he stood, moving to stand beside Isla in a clear statement of support. "Accurate," he said. "Painfully accurate. I witnessed the public rejection. I witnessed the humiliation. I witnessed an entire pack standing by while one of their own was torn apart for the crime of believing promises made to her, and I will be filing a formal complaint with the Pack Council about Crescent Pack's violation of the Accord within the week." The threat landed like a physical blow. Alpha Kenneth's face went pale, then red with barely suppressed rage. "You would threaten my pack over a misunderstanding with an Omega? Over hurt feelings?" "I would enforce the laws that govern all of us," Kale corrected coldly. "Laws that were put in place specifically to prevent powerful wolves from abusing those with less power. Laws that you have clearly forgotten in your pursuit of political advancement through your son's mating." He moved closer to the delegation, and despite being outnumbered, despite standing before 3 wolves who theoretically had every right to be here, he radiated such power that all 3 of them took an involuntary step back. "Isla Reed is under my personal protection now. Any attempt to contact her, harass her, or in any way interfere with her life going forward will be considered a direct challenge to my authority. And I promise you, Alpha Morrison, you do not want to make that challenge." "You cannot be serious," Vivian said, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "She is no one. A wolfless Omega with no family, no status, nothing that makes her worth protecting. What could she possibly offer you that would justify making an enemy of an entire pack? She offers me something you clearly have no concept of, Kyle said. Honesty, strength, the courage to stand up after being knocked down, and the wisdom to know her own worth even when everyone around her tried to convince her she was worthless. That is worth more than all the political alliances and strategic matings in the territory. He returned to his throne, settling into it with casual authority, and waved his hand in dismissal. This audience is over. You will leave my lands immediately, and you will not return without explicit invitation. Isla's status as a member of Crescent Pack is hereby revoked. She is a member of my household now, under my direct authority, and any dispute about this can be taken up with the Pack Council if you feel you have grounds to challenge it. Spoiler alert, you do not. Your Majesty, please, Marcus said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely distressed. I never meant to hurt her. I truly believed Vivian was my mate. If I could go back, if I could do it differently. But you cannot, Isla interrupted, finding her voice again. You cannot go back. You cannot undo the damage. And honestly, Marcus, I do not want you to try. Because if you had done it differently, if you had ended things privately and kindly, I might have believed the problem was me. I might have spent the rest of my life thinking I was not good enough, not special enough, not worth keeping. Instead, you showed me exactly who you are. A male who values appearances over integrity, who would rather cause pain than face temporary discomfort, who blames others for his own failures. And that is a gift, in its way, because now I know what I do not want. Now I know what I deserve, and it is so much more than you ever offered me. The words rang with truth and power, and Isla saw the moment Marcus truly understood what he had lost. Not an Omega who would have been grateful for scraps of attention, but a female who had found her strength and would never settle for less than she deserved again. Guards, Kale called, and immediately 2 massive warriors entered the room. Please escort our guests to the border. See that they reach Packlands safely and without incident. It was a clear dismissal, the kind that left no room for argument. Alpha. Kenneth looked like he wanted to protest, wanted to fight, but even he was not foolish enough to challenge the Alpha King in his own home. The delegation turned to leave, but at the last moment, Marcus looked back at Isla. I am sorry, he said quietly. For what it is worth, I truly am sorry for hurting you. It is worth very little, Isla replied. But I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless. Be happy with your true mate, Marcus. I sincerely hope she makes you a better male than you were with me. Then they were gone, the doors closing behind them with a finality that felt like the ending of one chapter and the beginning of another. Isla stood very still for a moment, processing what had just happened, what she had just done. She had confronted her past. She had stood up for herself. She had claimed her worth in front of the very people who had tried to take it away. And she had survived. More than survived. She had won. Isla. Kale's voice was soft, concerned. Are you all right? She turned to look at him, at the male who had given her shelter and training and protection without asking for anything in return, who had just made an enemy of an entire pack to defend her honor. And she felt something inside her chest that had been locked tight for as long as she could remember, finally break open. I love you, she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them, before she could think about whether it was too soon or inappropriate or a complete disaster in the making. I think I have been falling in love with you since that night in the rain, and I am terrified of it because I have such terrible judgment about these things, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it. So there it is. I love you, and you can do whatever you want with that information, but I needed you to know. The silence that followed felt eternal. Kale stared at her with an expression she could not read, silver eyes wide with something that might have been shock, or horror, or joy. She could not tell which. Then, slowly, carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile, he crossed the distance between them. "Say it again," he whispered, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her want to cry. "Please, Isla, say it again." "I love you," she repeated, her voice shaking but certain. "I love you, Cale Blackthorn. I love the male who sat with me in the rain. I love the king who fights for justice. I love the teacher who pushed me to be stronger. I love all of you, even the parts you think are too broken or too cold to be loved. I love you." "Thank Goddess," Cale breathed. And then he was kissing her. The kiss was everything their weeks of tension and restraint had been building toward, desperate and claiming and achingly tender all at once. His hands tangled in her hair, hers gripped his shoulders, and they came together like two halves of a whole that had been forcibly separated and finally allowed to reunite. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cale pressed his forehead to hers and laughed, the sound raw and relieved and so completely happy that it made Isla's heart soar. "I love you too," he said fiercely. "I have been fighting it, telling myself it was too soon, that you needed time, that I had no right to feel this way about someone I barely knew. But Isla, you are not someone I barely know. You are the female who woke me up from 5 years of existing without living. You are the one who made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond duty and power. You are my second chance at happiness, if you will have me." "Yes," Isla said, not even needing to think about it. "Yes, I will have you. All of you. The good and the broken and the complicated. I will have all of it." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring the moment. And Isla felt something settle inside her that had been restless and searching for as long as she could remember. This was home. Not a place, but a person. This was where she belonged. But even as she lost herself in the kiss, in the feel of Cale's arms around her, and the sure knowledge that he wanted her just as desperately as she wanted him, a small part of her brain registered a strange sensation in her chest. A warmth that was spreading outward from her heart, growing stronger with each passing second. A pull toward Cale that felt ancient and inevitable, and right in a way that transcended conscious choice. She pulled back, slightly, her eyes widening. "Cale, do you feel that?" "Feel what?" he started to ask, then stopped, his own expression shifting to something like wonder. Oh, goddess. Ela, that is. That is impossible. You said you did not have a wolf. You said she never emerged." "She did not," Isla confirmed, but even as she said it, she could feel something stirring inside her. Something that had been sleeping for her entire life, waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst, to wake up. And that catalyst, apparently, was standing right in front of her with silver eyes full of love and disbelief. "She is waking up," Isla whispered, wonder and terror warring in her voice. "Right now I can feel her. She is waking up, and she is. Kyle, what is happening to me?" "I think," Kyle said slowly, his voice thick with emotion, "your wolf has been waiting for you to be ready, waiting for you to be strong enough to handle her power. Waiting." He stopped, swallowed hard, waiting for her. Mate. The word hung between them, heavy with implications that would change everything. Mate. Not just love, not just a choice, but the bond that the moon goddess herself forged between two souls meant to be together for eternity. "But you said your mate died," Isla protested, even as every instinct in her body was screaming that this was right, that this was real, that the pull she felt toward Cale was not just attraction or gratitude, but something far more profound. "You said you lost her 5 years ago." "I did," Cale said. "At least, I thought I did. But Isla, there are stories. Old stories about second chance mates, about the moon goddess sometimes granting a new bond to those who have suffered and grown and proven themselves worthy of a second chance at happiness. I always thought they were just stories. I never imagined that she would give you me, Isla finished. A nobody Omega with no wolf and a history of terrible judgment about males. That she would give me you, Kale corrected firmly. A strong, brave, incredible female who survived something that should have broken her and came out stronger. A female who woke something in me I thought was dead forever. A female who is absolutely perfect exactly as she is. He pulled her close again, his hand sliding to rest over her heart, where the warmth was building to an almost uncomfortable intensity. Let her come forward, Isla. Let her wake up. I promise you, I will be here. I will not let anything happen to you. Isla closed her eyes, focusing inward on that stirring presence, on the wolf she had never felt before, but who somehow felt achingly familiar. And as she did, memories started flooding back. Memories that were not hers but also were. Images of another life. Another time. A woman with Isla's eyes, but a different face. Standing beside a male who radiated power and protection. A betrayal that had shattered everything. A death that should have ended her completely. And then, impossibly, a second chance. A return not to the same body, not to the same life, but to another one. To this one. She gasped, her eyes flying open to meet Kale's shocked gaze. You died, she whispered. We both died. But she brought us back. She gave us another chance. But she made us forget. Made us find each other again without knowing what we were. Who we had been. Oh, goddess, Kyle. Your mate did not die. She was me. I was her. We have been looking for each other this whole time, and we did not even know. The revelation should have been impossible. Should have been too much to accept. But as Isla spoke the words, as the truth settled over both of them like a benediction, it felt inevitable. Right. Like coming home after a long journey she had not realized she was taking. The moon goddess gave us a second chance. Kale breathed, pulling her impossibly closer. She let us find each other again, fall in love again, without the weight of what we lost. That is, Isla, that is the greatest gift anyone has ever received. So what does that mean? Isla asked, afraid of the answer but needing to know. What happens now? Now, Kale said, smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. Your wolf wakes up fully, and we complete what we started 5 years ago. If you want to. If you are ready. I want to, Isla said immediately. I have never wanted anything more. But Kyle, my wolf, when she emerges, what if she is not what everyone expected? What if she is small or weak? She will be perfect. Then Kale interrupted. Because she is yours. And you, Isla Reed, soon to be Isla Blackthorn if I have anything to say about it, are perfect exactly as you are. Whatever your wolf is, I will love her because she is part of you. The warmth in Isla's chest suddenly exploded outward, and she cried out as power like nothing she had ever imagined flooded through her veins. Her bones felt like they were reforming. Her skin felt too tight. Her senses suddenly overwhelmed with input as everything became sharper, clearer, more. She could smell Kale's scent, cedar and winter storms, and something uniquely him, and under it the scent of their bond, golden and unbreakable. She could hear his heartbeat, racing in time with hers. She could feel his wolf reaching for hers with desperate joy. And then, with a sensation like breaking through the surface of water after being submerged for too long, her wolf emerged. Not the small, weak creature she had always feared she might have, but something else entirely. Something powerful and ancient and absolutely certain of her place in the world. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Isla opened her eyes. which she distantly realized were now glowing with inner light, and looked at Cale. "Hello, mate," she said, her voice carrying harmonics from both her and her wolf. "I found you. Finally, after everything, I found you." "You did," Cale agreed, and his own eyes were glowing silver as his wolf rose to meet hers. "You found me, and I found you. And this time, nothing will ever separate us again." He kissed her then, a claiming kiss that sealed the bond between them, and Isla felt it snap into place like a lock finding its key. The mate bond, real and solid and absolutely unbreakable. She was his and he was hers, and nothing that Marcus or Alpha Morrison or anyone else could do would ever change that. When they finally broke, both of them breathing hard and grinning like fools, Cale took her hand and led her to the window that overlooked his territory. Their territory now, because she was not just his mate. She was his queen. "Are you ready for this?" he asked seriously. "Being my queen means dealing with pack politics and territorial disputes and wolves who will test you at every turn. It means public ceremonies and formal functions, and everyone watching your every move. It means enemies who will try to use you against me and friends who will expect you to be perfect. It means giving up any chance of a quiet, anonymous life. Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" Isla looked out at the territory spread before them, at the forests and mountains and rivers that made up the Northern Kingdom. A month ago, she would have been terrified. Would have insisted she was not strong enough, important enough, special enough for this kind of responsibility. But she was not that girl anymore. That girl had died in the rain the night Marcus rejected her. In her place stood a woman who had discovered her own strength, who had learned to fight and think and hold her own against anyone who tried to diminish her. A woman who had found her wolf and her mate and her purpose all at once. "I am certain," she said firmly. "I am absolutely certain. This is exactly what I want. You are exactly what I want. And I am ready to prove to everyone who ever dismissed me that I am exactly what you deserve." "Then, let us begin," Cale said, raising their joined hands to his lips and pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Let us show them all what happens when two broken people find each other and refuse to stay broken. Let us show them that second chances are real, that love is stronger than duty, that the moon goddess knows exactly what she is doing when she grants her blessings." 3 months later, Isla stood in the center of the grand ballroom of the Northern Palace, wearing a dress of silver and white that marked her as the Alpha Queen. Around her, representatives from every pack in the territory watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright hostility. The ceremony to formally recognize her as Cale's mate and co-ruler had been planned for weeks, every detail scrutinized, every possible challenge anticipated and prepared for. And in the crowd, relegated to the far back where they belonged, stood the Crescent Pack delegation. Alpha Morrison, his face carefully neutral but his eyes burning with resentment. Vivian, beautiful as always, but with a brittleness around her edges that suggested the last few months had not been kind to her. And Marcus, who had not stopped staring at Isla since she entered the room, his expression one of dawning realization and profound regret. Isla met his eyes across the distance and smiled, not with bitterness or revenge, but with genuine happiness. Because she had won, not by destroying him or making him suffer, though Goddess knew. He deserved both. But by becoming so completely and absolutely herself that his rejection had become nothing more than a footnote in her story. The ceremony began with the traditional recitation of lineages and pack laws, the binding oaths that would tie her to the Northern Kingdom and all its people. Isla spoke her words clearly and firmly, accepting the responsibility, claiming her place at Cale's side, not as a lesser partner, but as an equal. And when the time came for the final binding, when Cale took her hand and pressed it over his heart, while she did the same to him, The mate bond flared to life between them in a visible display of golden light that drew gasps from the assembled wolves. "I present to you," Cale announced, his voice ringing with pride and love and absolute conviction, "Queen Isla Blackthorn, my mate, my equal, my heart. Anyone who wishes to challenge her right to stand beside me, to help me rule, to share in all decisions regarding pack law and territory. Management may do so now." The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Because the mate bond blazing between them was undeniable proof that the moon goddess herself had chosen this, had blessed this union, and to challenge it would be to challenge divine will itself. "Then it is done," Cale said. He pulled Isla close and kissed her in front of everyone, a claiming kiss that left no doubt about his feelings, about her importance, about the fact that she was not just his. Queen in name, but in every way that mattered. When he released her, Isla turned to face the assembled packs, with her head held high and her wolf humming contentedly in her chest. "I know many of you are wondering how a wolfless Omega from an insignificant pack could possibly end up here," she said, her voice carrying easily through the silent room. "I wondered the same thing 3 months ago. I thought I was nothing. I thought I was worth nothing. But I learned something important in that time. Your worth is not determined by who wants you or who rejects you. It is not determined by your rank or your lineage, or whether you meet someone else's expectations. It is determined by who you choose to be when everything is stripped away and you are left with nothing but your own strength and courage." She let her gaze sweep across the crowd, making sure every wolf present understood her next words. "I am here because I chose to be. Because when life knocked me down, I got back up. Because when someone told me I was nothing, I proved them wrong. And because I found a male who saw my strength before I did, and loved me enough to help me find it for myself. That is what I will bring to this position. That perspective. That understanding that true strength comes not from never falling, but from rising every time you do." The speech was met with a roar of approval from the northern pack wolves, and slowly, hesitantly, the other packs joined in. Even Alpha Morrison clapped, though his expression suggested he was doing so through gritted teeth. But there was one person who did not clap. Marcus stood frozen, his face pale, and his eyes fixed on Isla with something that looked like grief. And in that moment, Isla understood. He had not just lost her. He had lost the chance to be part of her story, part of her transformation. He would spend the rest of his life knowing that the female he had called nothing had become a queen, and that if he had been strong enough, brave enough, wise enough to see her value, he could have been standing beside her instead of watching from the back of the room while another male claimed everything he had thrown away. It was the sweetest revenge Isla could have imagined. The ceremony concluded with feasting and dancing that lasted well into the night. Isla found herself swept from conversation to conversation, meeting alphas and betas and omegas from across the territory, answering questions about her past and her plans for the future with a grace she had not known she possessed. But through it all, she was always aware of Cale, of his presence at her side or across the room, of the mate bond humming between them like a living thing, of the way his eyes tracked her movement with possessive pride and deep, abiding love. As the night wound down and the last guest departed, Cale took her hand and led her away from the ballroom, through corridors she had come to know as home, to their private chambers that overlooked the forest where they had first met. "You were incredible tonight," he said, pulling her into his arms the moment the door closed behind them. "Every wolf in that room fell in love with you. You are going to be the greatest queen this territory has ever known." "I had a good teacher," Isla replied, rising on her toes to kiss him softly. "And a mate who believes in me even when I do not believe in myself. That makes all the difference." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the forest where everything had changed, where a broken girl had been found by a king who had forgotten his crown, where two lost souls had recognized each other through the rain and the pain, and started the journey that led them here. "I love you," Isla whispered into the darkness. "Thank you for finding me. Thank you for saving me. Thank you for loving me." "I love you too," Kale replied. "And Isla, for what it is worth, I think you saved me just as much as I saved you. Maybe more. You gave me a reason to feel again, to hope again, to believe that happiness was possible after everything I lost. That is a gift I can never repay." "Then do not repay it," Isla said simply. "Just love me. Stand beside me. Build this life with me. That is all I need. That is all I have ever needed." "Done," Kyle said, sealing the promise with a kiss. And as they stood together in the darkness, two people who had been broken and lost and written off as nothing important, who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from the ashes of their pain, Isla finally understood what it meant to be chosen. Not by destiny or divine will or political necessity, but by someone who saw her, really saw her, and decided she was worth everything. That, she thought as sleep finally claimed her in the safety of her mate's arms, was the greatest magic of all.